They said the vault was sealed for eternity, that its sigils would never again be disturbed. But if that were true, then why was the sound of chains echoing from behind its adamantium door? Some Grey Knights swear they still hear him, the one who refused the Purge. A warrior whose name was struck from every librum, every chronicle, every tome of Titan. A brother once hailed as a prodigy of purity, and later punished with something so unimaginable that even the Inquisition trembles to speak of it. His story begins with a question no Grey Knight should ever ask. It started on the ash world of Varello's 9, a dead place where the wind carried only dust and the memories of a civilization bleached clean by war. Thunderhawks cut across the gray horizon like blades of silver, disgorging warriors in ceramite the color of moonlit steel. Among them stood Brother Captain Kalen Varros, stoic, disciplined, crafted for war by the Emperor's own gene mysteries. Yet for all his perfection, something in him was different. Kalen had always sensed more than his brothers. Where others felt only the warp's threat, he sensed texture shades of thought, notes of regret, flickers of what once were souls before corruption twisted them beyond recognition. The chaplains called it sensitivity. The prognosticars called it intuition. The Grand Masters called it dangerous. But on Varello's 9, that sensitivity became a curse. The order was clear. A plague cult had dragged a shard of something demonic beneath the surface. The knights were to cleanse the settlement, purge all life, and destroy the relic before the bloom spread beyond containment. A standard extermination, necessary and unquestionable. Unquestionable except to Kalen. The settlement was silent when they arrived, a grid of shattered homes buried beneath drifting ash. But as Kalen walked through the ruins, he felt presence, not demonic, not hostile, human. The Auspex confirmed it moments later. Survivors, scattered, hiding, trembling in basements and shattered shelters. Children, workers, elders. None bore the marks of corruption. They were untouched, but protocol demanded their deaths. Steel boots crunched beside him as Castellan Dramas approached, his voice a monotone reverberation through Vox filters. Cleanse the sector. No exceptions. Kalen said nothing at first. The wind blew ash over his greaves. He could hear heartbeats beneath the rubble fast, terrified, innocent. They are not tainted, he finally said. That is irrelevant, Dramas replied. Exposure risk spread. You know the doctrine, Kalen did. He had recited it since childhood. Purity before mercy, duty before sentiment. The Emperor's will above all. But this time, something in him rebelled. A quiet voice that whispered with the clarity of a blade drawn in candlelight. Must we become monsters to destroy them? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he knelt near a collapsed structure, sensing the faint pulse of a child inside. A girl, maybe 6 or 7, crying silently into dust. He could save her. He could save all of them, or he could obey. When he stood, the ash fell from his armor like snow. We can extract them, he said. Quarantine, evaluation, redemption where possible. Drama stepped closer, towering even over Kellen's imposing form. Brother Captain, we do not redeem. We erase. Kalen met his visor, seeing his own reflection warped in the polished steel. Then the doctrine is flawed. Those words should never have been spoken. Within moments, bolters were raised not at the survivors, but at Kalen himself. The Grey Knights do not tolerate deviation. Not in enemy, not in brother. Kellen's gauntlet tightened on his halberd. He realized the choice had already been made for him. Then the ground trembled. A shockwave rippled through the ruins as the demonic shard awakened, sending tendrils of psychic corruption spiraling into the air like smoke. Screams erupted from beneath the rubble, not of taint, but of terror as the warp clawed at reality. Before Kalen could move, the Castellan issued the Purge order. Purifying flame roared across the settlement. Entire families vanished in white fire. Kalen froze. The psychic echoes of hundreds of dying minds slammed into him, a tidal wave of agony. He staggered, roaring as the pain tore through him like claws. That moment changed him. That moment damned him. When the flames died, only ash remained ash, and the twisted, melted bones of those he could have saved. Kalen stood silently amid the carnage, his armor blackened, his eyes burning with something no Grey Knight should possess. Doubt. The shard was secured moments later, but no one spoke. The silence was heavier than the corpse-filled air. Wordlessly, the squad returned to their strike cruiser. The report would have been simple. Mission accomplished. Threat purged. But drama sealed an addendum. Brother Captain Kalen Varos displays signs of instability, potential emotional contamination. Recommend immediate evaluation by the Ordo Malleus. Kalen said nothing during the transit. He sat in the apothecarian, staring at his gauntlets. The blood of the innocent had been burned away, but the memory of their screams clung to his mind like spectral chains. When Titan sigils shimmered into view weeks later, Kalen felt no relief. He was taken directly to the Hall of Penitence. Interrogation by the Inquisition is clinical, cold, methodical. Kalen endured psychic probes that scraped his soul raw. Echoes of warped flame flickered in every memory they touched, yet he did not break. "Why did you defy doctrine?" they demanded. "Doctrine is not the Emperor," he answered. "Your compassion endangered the Imperium. Compassion is not weakness. You question your brothers, your command, your purity. I question slaughter without necessity." The interrogators exchanged silent glances. His responses were unacceptable, worse dangerous. A Grey Knight who questions is a Grey Knight who can fall. For weeks the examinations continued. Layers of his mind peeled apart like parchment. They found no corruption, no taint, no warp-tainted seed driving his rebellion. What they found was something far worse: conviction, a belief that doctrine could be wrong, a belief that mercy had value, a belief that the Emperor might not wish the innocent to burn. Such thoughts were heresy, even if they were true. Grandmaster Vardis stood over him on the final day. "Kalen Varos, your soul shows no warp stain, and yet you resist obedience." Kalen's voice was hoarse. "Because obedience without conscience is death. Conscience is the first step toward weakness," Vardis replied. Kalen shook his head. "No, fear is." The chamber fell silent. Even the servo-skulls paused mid-flight. Vardis exhaled slowly. "You understand what must be done." "Yes," Kalen said. "But I will not repent for refusing to kill children." Vardis closed his eyes, not in anger. In disappointment, something infinitely colder. "Then your punishment will be exceptional." He raised his staff. Sigils ignited. Kalen was sedated, restrained, and taken deep beneath Titan, far below the libraries. Beyond the crypts, into the forbidden vaults where even the chaplains rarely tread. The air shimmered with wards older than memory. The walls hummed with sealed power. They called it the Silence Vault. No one imprisoned within had ever left. Kalen was bound to an adamantium dais. Chains inscribed with anti-warp runes coiled around his limbs like serpents of cold iron. His helmet was removed, leaving him bare before the Council of Grand Masters. A ritual circle glowed around him, one used not for execution, but erasure. "You will not die," Vardis said. "Death would free you. You will not be turned to stone, nor sacrificed, nor cast into the warp. No, your punishment must be equal to your defiance." Kalen's voice was steady. "I feel no fear." "I know," Vardis replied. "That is why this will break you." The ritual began. Psychic force ripped through Kalen's mind like a storm, but it did not destroy. It peeled. It unmade. Memory by memory, layer by layer. Not to purge corruption, but to hollow him, carving out the man who once questioned, leaving nothing but obedience. But something unexpected happened. Kalen resisted, not with anger, not with hate, with sorrow. Fragments of the lives he failed to save clung to him, anchoring him, shielding pieces of his identity from the ritual's claws. The more they tried to hollow him, the more those memories crystallized into unbreakable shards. The Grand Masters intensified their efforts, and that was when they realized Kalen was changing. His psychic aura began to twist not toward corruption, but toward something impossible for a Grey Knight. Individual will. He was becoming something they could not control. The ritual faltered. Kalen opened his eyes, and for a moment, the vault dimmed. Not with demonic presence, but with the crushing weight of grief so profound it warped the air. Vardis stepped back. "This is impossible," Kalen whispered, barely audible. "You cannot erase what was right." The vault trembled. And in that moment, the Grand Masters decided his fate. He could not be freed. He could not be executed. He could not be trusted. So they chose a punishment no warrior of Titan had ever suffered. They sealed him alive within the Silence Vault, a coffin the size of a room. A place where time had no meaning, where no sound could reach, where even thought struggled to form under the weight of endless psychic suppression. A prison designed not to torture, but to forget. The adamantium door closed with a final echoing thud. Some say he still lives, unable to die, unable to sleep, trapped between consciousness and void. Others say his psychic presence lingers, whispering through the cracks of the vault, seeking release. But recently, someone reported hearing a sound from within. A heartbeat, a chain shifting, a whisper. I remember. What they found next should never have been possible. The vault door groaned like something ancient remembering how to breathe. Dust fell from the arch as the runes along its frame sputtered, dimmed, then flickered back to life with a frantic stutter like a machine spirit trying to warn its keepers too late. The wardens stared at one another through their visor slits. None spoke, none dared. The Silence Vault was not supposed to make noise. Nothing inside was supposed to move. Nothing inside was supposed to be, yet there it was again. A single metallic rattle, faint but unmistakable chains dragging across stone. A scribe stumbled backward, nearly tripping over his robes. That can't be. Enough. The Justicar silenced him with a gesture, though even his gauntlet trembled slightly. They approached the vault's viewing aperture, an eye-sized slit layered with multiple psychic dampeners. Through it, one could normally see nothing but darkness thick as pitch, but now, something shifted in that darkness. Not a shape, not a silhouette. Something more like the void recoiling around a presence. A soft vibration pulsed through the floor, like a heartbeat, then another, and then a whisper, dry, cracked, impossibly faint. I remember. The Justicar stepped back as if struck. His auto senses recalibrated twice before accepting the audio reading. The scribes began scattering data slates across the floor in their panic, scrambling to record, to report, to rationalize. But no one entered the vault. Not yet. Titan's upper cloisters learned of the anomaly within the hour. By the next cycle, word had reached the Grand Masters. And by Dawn Cycle's cold gray light, a conclave had been summoned, one that hadn't assembled in centuries. The Hall of Echoes was lit by pale witchlight, casting long shadows across the statues of fallen heroes. But today, the statues did not seem to watch over their descendants. Today, they seemed to judge them. Grand Master Vardis stood at the center, his armor etched with the scars of 1,000 campaigns. His voice was calm when he spoke, too calm. How long? 4 hours and 21 minutes since the first disturbance, answered Prognosticar Sereth, a robed figure whose eyes glowed faintly with perpetual foresight. The pulse frequency is increasing. His mind? Vardis asked, though his jaw tightened on the question. Sereth hesitated. Active. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Active meant awake. Awake meant aware, and aware meant something far worse. It should be impossible, another Grand Master muttered. Many things on Titan should be, Sereth replied. And yet, Vardis's gaze shifted toward the sealed door leading down into the vault levels. His voice sank into something colder, older. He was meant to forget, all of it. He didn't, Sereth said. The warding matrix is failing. Something is pushing back, something. Grieving. The murmurs fell silent. Grief. A word that had no place in a Grey Knight's lexicon, let alone in the vaults. But if there was one soul on Titan who had ever borne such a burden, it was the man chained in the Silence Vault, Kalen Varos, the brother who refused the Purge. The brother they buried alive in thoughtlessness. Vardis dismissed the assembly with a gesture, though the tension lingered like smoke. One by one, the elders retreated into the shadowed halls, leaving Vardis alone beneath the cold statues. He stood still for a long time, not in contemplation, in dread. For across the warp-thin edge of his perception, he felt something he had not felt since the day Kalen was sealed away. A memory that wasn't his. The scream of a child, ash, flame, and a voice asking why. He turned sharply, as if shaking the memory loose, but it clung. Far below, the vault chains rattled again. Deep inside the Silence Vault, Kalen felt the weight of existence pressing in from every direction. Not stone, not metal. Something heavier. Time. A million moments collapsed into one. A million empty hours stretched into eternity. He had no sleep, no dreams, no end. Only a single unending thought looping through him like a mantra carved into bone. Remember. He didn't know how long he had been here. A year? A century? A breath? The vault erased such concepts. But something had shifted, something that had never shifted before. His memories were returning. Slowly at first, like embers glowing under dead ash. Then with rising intensity, until the faces burned behind his eyes. The girl beneath the rubble, the workers clinging to one another, the elders praying for mercy that never came. He remembered their terror. He remembered their silence. He remembered his brothers burning them alive, and he remembered choosing to oppose it. That memory alone sustained him, cutting through the psychic suppression like a blade of light through fog. Then new memories arose. Ones he did not know, warriors chanting in ritual. Steel rings closing. Voices he had never heard whispering judgments in darkened halls, the cracking of seals, and then something else. A presence beyond the door. Fear. Kalen's head lifted. The chains resisted, their runes blazing briefly as they tried to anchor him back into emptiness. But not even the strongest wards could hold a mind that had found its purpose again. He flexed his fingers, slow and deliberate. The chains around his wrists rattled. They had never done that before. They were not meant to, he breathed. And the vault seemed to breathe with him. Somewhere above, a dozen alarms chimed. The runes along the walls flickered, one by one. And Kalen whispered again, not to the wardens, not to the Grand Masters, but to himself. I remember what I am. The vault dimmed, as if recoiling. I remember what you took. A psychic ripple radiated from him, small, almost gentle. But even small ripples become tidal waves, given enough silence to grow. In the monitoring chamber, the lights went out. Emergency lanterns snapped alive a moment later, bathing the room in crimson. Data slates melted under psychic interference. Vox feeds died with a screech of static. The Justicar swore under his breath. He's destabilizing the entire level. Sereth appeared behind him, robes swirling like shadow. No, he corrected softly. The vault is destabilizing him. The Justicar turned. Explain. Sereth stepped closer to the nearest display, its illuminated sigils showing distortion patterns. He was never meant to be conscious, the prognosticar said. The suppression fields keep him in a state between thought and oblivion. But when memories returned, the conflict began. What conflict? Identity. Sereth touched the sigils. They flickered violently. He is remembering what he believed, what he lost, what you tried to erase. But the vault is trying to suppress it. The result is tearing him apart. The Justicar felt a chill beneath his armor. Will he survive? Possibly, Sereth said. But the real question is, he turned toward the vault door. Will we? The Justicar stepped back without realizing it. What does that mean? It means, Sereth said, voice low, that he is a Grey Knight whose will resisted psychic hollowing. A warrior whose mind is stronger than the suppression designed to unmake him. A man driven by grief so pure it has become power. The Justicar's throat tightened. So he's awakening, Sereth whispered. The vault trembled again. And this time everyone felt it. Above Titan's surface, storms formed from nothing. Warp lightning flashed across the sky in jagged white arcs. The librarium's wards flared. The training halls darkened. Every psyker within 100 miles gasped at the same instant, feeling a pressure bloom behind their eyes. Something was stirring, something buried, something wrong. Grandmaster Vardis descended the vault stairs alone, each step heavier than the last. He did not call for guards. He did not call for aid. Some truths were not meant to be witnessed by many. He reached the bottom. The vault corridor was silent. Then he heard it. A whisper through the metal. Soft, calm. I know your voice. Vardis froze, breath caught in his throat. The vault door glowed faintly, runes cycling between failure and frantic self-repair. Kalen, he said, forcing steadiness into his words. You must remain still. You do not understand the danger. A pause, then laughter. Not mad, not angry, wounded. I understand more than you ever allowed. Vardis stepped closer. He felt the psychic bleed pressing against his mind like a tide testing seawalls. Your memories. They will destroy you, he warned. No, Kalen whispered. They will free me. The vault lights flickered, and then a new sound emerged. A crack, not from the door, from the chains within. Vardis's heart stopped. Kalen, stop. You cannot. The entire vault shuddered violently. A fissure of raw psychic force split across the door's surface like a glowing scar. Sparks leapt from the containment nodes. The air hummed with rising tension like a storm about to break. Kellen's voice came one last time. You buried me alive. But you could not bury the truth. The warding matrix overloaded. Light flooded the corridor. And as the vault seals began to fail, Vardis realized something with chilling clarity. Kalen Varos wasn't trying to escape. He was trying to stand. And the moment those chains finally broke, Titan itself would feel it. The blast did not come as an explosion, but as a breath, an exhalation of power so vast and quiet, it felt like the world held itself still, just to bear witness. Light rippled outward from the vault door, warping the air into shimmering waves. A low hum rose beneath Titan's stone foundations, the sound of ancient machinery straining against forces it was never meant to contain. Vardis staggered back as his armor's runic wards flared in desperate defense. His visor dimmed to shield his eyes from the radiance bleeding through the cracks in the adamantium. Even through all his layered protections, he felt Kellen's presence pressing outward in slow, deliberate pulses. Not chaotic. Not furious, awakening. The corridor lights shattered one by one, sparks raining across the floor like falling embers. When the last fixture died, only the vault remained lit, its fractured sigils glowing a deep, mournful blue. Then the pressure stopped. The hum faded. Silence reclaimed the corridor, as if the world had inhaled and chosen not to exhale again. Vardis dared a step forward. Kalen, he said, voice low, steady only because he forced it to be. For a long moment, nothing answered. Only the soft ticking of cooling metal filled the space. But then, beneath the surface of the door, something moved like a shadow drifting through deeper shadow. I stood, Kalen said, his voice resonating through the metal as though spoken from beneath a great ocean. The chains remembered how to shake. Vardis's chest tightened. He knew what stood before him wasn't the same brother who had once knelt on Ash Sector ruins, begging for the lives of innocents. This Kalen was different, shaped by silence, sharpened by grief, reforged by memories too painful to forget. You must stop, Vardis said. If you push further, the vault will collapse. The consequences. You fear consequences? Kalen murmured. I have lived inside one. The vault door glowed brighter for an instant, so bright, the stone floor beneath Vardis cracked in thin, spiderweb fissures. He took another step back. His palms were sweating inside armored gauntlets. Kalen continued speaking, his voice quiet but clear. I saw them again, Vardis. Their faces, their fear. The flames that were not their sin but ours. You are not the only one who carries memory, Vardis said before he could stop himself. Silence. Then softer, you remember too, it wasn't a question. Vardis opened his mouth to deny it. Instinct, habit, doctrine. But the lie refused to form. The memory he had suppressed, the glimpse he'd felt during the ritual, shuddered awake within him. The pleading eyes, the small hands, the silence after their screams. He turned his head away from the vault, ashamed of something he had no right to claim. The air around him thickened, as though Kalen could feel that shame through the door. I see it in you, Kalen said. Regret makes its own sound. Vardis swallowed hard. Regret is not permission. Your awakening cannot go unchecked. A faint chuckle vibrated the metal. It was not mocking, only weary. I do not seek freedom, Kalen said. Not yet. Vardis's head snapped toward the vault. Then what are you trying to do? The shadow inside shifted again. Something about its movement felt wrong, not monstrous, but human, fragile, worn thin by the weight of too many years in darkness. I am trying to remember my purpose, Kalen said. And your vault fights me still. The phrase lingered like a chill draft cutting through armor joints. Purpose, not vengeance. Not rebellion, purpose. Before Vardis could question it, a tremor rolled through the lower levels of Titan. Dust drifted from the ceiling. The walls vibrated as if a great beast stirred beneath the fortress. Vardis tapped his vox, forcing calm into his tone. Control level report. Static answered him. A faint screech, then nothing. The vault's psychic event was interfering with communications. He disconnected, teeth gritted. Kalen, listen to me. Your psychic field is destabilizing the substratum. If you continue, you risk collapsing the entire lower sanctum. The shadow paused. Then, I know. A cold ripple washed down Vardis's spine. You know, I can feel every stone, Kalen murmured. Every chain, every ward. They press on me like fingers around a throat. I feel the strain of them. Their fear. Vardis blinked. The vault fears you? No, Kalen said. The vault fears failing. Failing to hold me. Failing to contain what you believed I might become. Vardis felt his pulse spike. He had expected rage, fury, madness, but this was something far more dangerous. Kalen was lucid, calm, controlled. That meant he had grown stronger than the suppression meant to break him. Kalen, Vardis said, voice low and steady. The memories returning to you, they will cloud judgment. They will twist your thoughts. Memories do not twist, Kalen replied. They reveal. A quiet weight settled on the words, the kind that pressed with truth. Vardis forced himself closer to the door until the psychic heat radiating from it tingled against his armor. What is it you believe they reveal? There was a pause so long Vardis wondered if Kalen had slipped back into silence. Then Kalen whispered, that the doctrine we uphold hides a wound we refuse to see. The chamber temperature seemed to drop. We killed the innocent, Kalen said. Not as an accident, not as necessity, but because fear commanded it. Fear of corruption. Fear of deviation. Fear of the slightest risk. Vardis clenched his jaw. You do not understand what is at stake. But I do, Kalen replied. More than you think. The shadows behind the vault door moved once more, and something changed in the air, subtle but unmistakable. Not power, not pressure, clarity. I know now what you feared most, Kalen said softly. Not that I would fall, but that I would question. Vardis felt the words strike him like a blade sliding into a seam in his armor. Kalen wasn't wrong. The silence vault trembled again, less violently this time, as if responding to the calm within rather than resisting it. Then a sudden sharp sound cracked through the corridor. A chain breaking. Vardis instinctively raised his halberd, even though the door still held between them. Kalen. It's only one, Kalen said, breathing heavy. There are many left. What are you doing? Vardis demanded. Testing myself, Kalen murmured. Seeing which part of me the vault tried hardest to destroy. The shadow shifted again. When Kalen spoke next, His voice carried a tone that felt dangerously close to sorrow. It was compassion. That was the chain they forged most tightly. Vardas's heart clenched, not at the revelation, but at the realization that Kalen had noticed exactly what the ritual had targeted. Compassion, the seed of his defiance. The thing they feared most. The silence stretched until it became unbearable. Then Kalen said something that stopped Vardas's breath cold. "You believed you were saving me from myself." A faint shiver ran through Vardas's armor. "We believed we were saving the Imperium." "No," Kalen whispered. "You were saving the Imperium from the truth." Before Vardas could respond, another tremor shook the hallway, this one much stronger. Alarms blared, red lumen strips flickered. Stone fragments fell from the ceiling. Vardas ducked instinctively as a crack split down the wall. Kalen inhaled sharply from within the vault, and the floor vibrated in sympathy. "Kalen!" Vardas shouted. "You're tearing the foundations apart." "No," Kalen said, voice suddenly distant. "Something else is awakening." Vardas paused. "What do you mean?" Kalen did not answer. "Not immediately." A long, shuddering breath echoed through the metal, as if he were sensing something far beyond the walls of his prison. Then, "Vardas, did you ever ask why I felt the survivors on Varello's 9? The Grand Master froze. "I believed it was intuition," Vardas said. "Sensitivity. Nothing more." Kalen's voice fell to a chilling whisper. "It wasn't intuition." The vault pulsed, sending a surge through the corridor lights. "It was inheritance." Vardas's breath caught. "Inheritance?" he asked slowly. "From whom?" Kalen answered with 3 words that tightened every nerve in Vardas's body. "Not the Emperor's." Silence expanded through the corridor like a living thing. Vardas's gauntlet trembled. "Kalen, what are you saying?" Kalen exhaled shakily. "I remember something else now. Something buried beneath the memories you tried to tear away." The shadows behind the vault door began to gather, twisting together into a shape Vardas could not define. Then Kalen spoke in a voice filled with revelation and fear. "There is something inside me that was never meant to exist in a gray night." Vardas stepped back, heart hammering. "What?" he whispered. Kalen's final words were soft enough to sound like a prayer, yet heavy enough to shatter everything Vardas thought he knew. "A soul that is not entirely human." The vault trembled once more. This time, not from breaking chains, but from awakening truth. The air around the vault tightened, pulling inward as if the very atmosphere recoiled from Kalen's confession. A soul not entirely human. Vardas could scarcely process the thought. The gray nights were the Emperor's purest sons, forged from gene lines untouched by mortal flaw. There was no room in that lineage for anything else. Yet the vault's trembling slowed now, as though Kalen's admission had shifted something fundamental, not in the mechanisms, but in the space between them. A quietness settled in the corridor, not calm but the breath before lightning strikes. Vardas swallowed hard, feeling a sick weight settle in his chest. "What are you?" he asked, the words scraping from his throat like something dragged from deep water. Kalen did not answer immediately. For a heartbeat, he sounded impossibly far away. "I don't know," he said. "Not fully. Not yet." A faint, sorrowful hum resonated through the metal, a psychic vibration too gentle to be dangerous, too deep to be ignored. "But I remember pieces," Kalen continued. "Fragments you tried to purge. Fragments I shielded without understanding why." His shadow shifted behind the door again, no longer writhing but slow, deliberate, anchored by something newly reclaimed. Vardas pressed his palm to the vault surface. It was warm. Dangerously warm, but steady. "What fragments?" he asked. Kalen exhaled sharply. "Voices, not demonic. Not warp-born. Older, like echoes of something that existed before any of us, before Titan, before the Imperium." Vardas's pulse hammered against his skull. "The warp?" he whispered. "Are these warp resonances?" "No," Kalen said, slightly louder. "The warp twists, corrupts, mocks these memories." "Don't." The ground vibrated softly, like a giant shifting in sleep. They are sorrowful, Kalen added. The word lodged itself into Vardas's mind. Sorrowful, not malicious. Not tempting, sorrowful. Souls don't linger like that, Vardas said, though the conviction in his voice wavered. Not without corruption. Perhaps, Kalen murmured. And perhaps that's why they hid me away. The vault pulse slowed, sinking disturbingly with Kalen's breath. Vardas felt sweat beading across his brow. He feared the implications more than the power behind them. Kalen, this inheritance you speak of, how could it exist? Every cell of your being was shaped by the Emperor, Kalen finished softly. Yes, I know. That is what they told us. But have you never wondered why I sensed things others could not? Why I felt the innocent when doctrine told us to ignore such subtleties? Vardas shook his head, though Kalen could not see it. Some are gifted, Vardas insisted. Some carry heightened resonance, but not like this, Kalen replied. Not enough to feel emotions that weren't my own. Not enough to shield fragments of memory from a Grandmaster conclave. Not enough to... He stopped suddenly. Silence fell so abruptly, it felt physical, as if the entire chamber held its breath. Vardas leaned closer. Kalen? A low, pained groan echoed from deep within the vault metal straining. Not from pressure, but from something moving inside. Something's waking, Kalen whispered. Not in me. Around me. The vault lights flickered wildly. The runes along the floor crawled with threads of crackling energy. Explain, Vardas said sharply. Kalen sounded confused, almost afraid. There's another presence here, faint, buried. It feels trapped, like me. The tremor intensified, dust sifting down from the ceiling like falling ash. Then a deep, resonant thud struck the vault door from the inside. Not violent, not hostile, a knock. Vardas's heart seized. Kalen, what was that? Kalen inhaled sharply. It's not me. A second knock, lower, heavier. This time Vardas felt it through the floor. Kalen, back away from it, Vardas barked. I can't, Kalen replied. I'm still bound. But I can feel it waking, whatever it is. The vault wasn't built only for me, Vardas. The realization hit Vardas like a hammer. The Silence Vault had existed long before Kalen's sentencing. Its origins were shrouded in half-truths and forbidden subsections of the Librarium archives. It had been said to hold things too dangerous for death, too unknown for study. But no one ever said what those things were. A third knock boomed through the corridor, stronger than the last. Stone walls shook. The runes stuttered in panic. Kalen's voice dropped to a whisper. It's calling to me. Vardas felt the air constrict in his chest. Do not answer it. I'm not, Kalen murmured. But it hears me anyway. The vault door bulged inward by a fraction of an inch. Not tearing breathing. Vardas stepped back, instinctively raising his halberd, though he knew it would do nothing here. Kalen, he said, forcing calm through his mounting fear. What do you feel? Kalen hesitated, wrestling with something unseen. Then, slowly, loneliness. A chill swept across Vardas's spine. And hunger. The chamber lights died completely. Then a sound unlike anything Vardas had heard vibrated through the vault. A low, resonant hum, layered with tones that were too deep and too high all at once, like multiple voices harmonizing in grief. Kalen gasped. It knows me. Vardas's throat tightened. Kalen, what is it? The response came broken, strained as if torn from him. Something ancient, something forgotten, something that was imprisoned before I ever existed. His voice dropped to a tremor. And something that recognizes what I am becoming. Outside the vault, the psychic hum built into a throbbing wave that rattled the entire mountain. Somewhere far overhead, alarms wailed through tightened spires. Vardas braced himself as the vault door glowed white-hot at the seams. What does it want? He demanded. Kalen's answer was barely audible. To be remembered. A pulse of force slammed into the door, sending Vardas skidding backward across the stone floor. His armor screeched against the ground. When he rose, the vault was glowing like a furnace, the runes melting into molten trails. Kellen's voice rose in terror for the first time. "Vardis, it's waking fully. Tell me what it sees in you," Vardis shouted over the rising hum. Another pulse hit. The cracks in the door widened by a finger's breadth, enough to leak blinding light. Kalen cried out, not in pain, but in revelation. It sees its kin. The air imploded inward, and through the blinding radiance of the vault's cracks, Vardis saw just for an instant something move behind Kalen. A shape not bound by chains, a shape massive and luminous, a shape that shouldn't exist. Vardis stumbled back, stunned into a whisper. "Kalen, what have they locked in there with you?" Kellen's voice trembled like breaking glass. "Not with me," he said. "Because of me." The vault door split down the center with a deafening crack. Light spilled out like a tidal wave. And just before the glare swallowed the corridor, Vardis heard one final whisper from within, soft, terrified, and impossibly human. It wasn't meant for one soul. The world convulsed, and everything went white. For a long moment, the chamber seemed to forget how to breathe. The vault doors still trembled from the force of their opening, dust falling like the last moments of a dying star. And in the center of that trembling quiet stood Kalen, motionless, staring into the shimmering sphere of contained memory that pulsed like a captured soul. Around him, the air quivered with the psychic aftershock of what he had just witnessed. His own actions, rewritten by Forbidden's hands, twisted into something monstrous that the Imperium had wanted him to believe. It felt as if his mind had been torn open and stitched together in the wrong shape. The Inquisitors hadn't recorded a lie. They had recorded a performance. A carefully sculpted truth. One that erased the presence of the demonic entity that had manipulated the entire battle. One that had erased the cries of the civilians begging for protection. One that reframed Kalen's refusal to fire as treachery rather than the only act of sanity left in a field of madness. The sphere dimmed, its glow weakening like a candle pushed to its last breath. Kalen reached out, fingertips shaking as they brushed its surface. A flicker, a pulse. And then, another memory surged to life, one not meant to be seen. A cloaked figure. A sigil hidden beneath layers of sorrow-black wax. A voice whispering, "Erase him. The night must be unmade." The vault trembled as if sensing the trespass. The illusion collapsed, and with it, something inside Kalen snapped. He staggered back, gasping, the weight of betrayal slamming into him with the fury of a charging beast. His entire identity, built on discipline, loyalty, purity of purpose, bent under the revelation. His breath trembled, his armored fists clenching until Ceramite groaned under the pressure. The Inquisition had not punished him for disobedience. They had punished him for knowing the truth. A low hum echoed from the vault's edge. A rune flared. Kalen spun, driven by instinct, but it was too late. The chamber activated its failsafe. Psycho-reactive chains erupted from the walls, spectral bindings snapping around his limbs, chest, and throat with the force of a psychotic storm. The air ionized. Sparks crawled across the floor like hungry insects. He dropped to one knee, not out of weakness but out of calculation. He felt the chains digging into his mind, searching for entry, trying to pry open his memories and collapse them into sanctioned narrative. A rewrite, a cleansing. The same technique that had shaped the false record he had watched moments before. And for the first time since his indoctrination into the Grey Knights, Kalen felt fear. Not of death, not of pain, but of forgetting. He braced himself, summoning every fragment of his will. The chains tightened, humming in psychic unison, pushing into him, his vision blurred. Light streaked across the chamber, his pulse hammered like bolter fire. Something deeper pushed back, a presence, a memory. A voice spoken across battlefields strewn with horrors. "Hold, Kalen. A knight's mind is a fortress. Make yours unbreakable." The words of his former Justicar, the one who had stood first at the breach where Kalen had refused the Purge. The one who had died believing Kalen would carry the truth. He anchored himself to that voice, let it become the foundation of his resistance. He dug his mental heels into the sinking earth of his own collapsing consciousness and roared back against the intrusion. The vault shook. The chains writhed. And then, shockingly, something yielded. Not the chains. Him. A part of his mind broke under the pressure, a fracture like a crack running through stone. Memories spilled, scattering like shattered glass. Images drifted in front of him, his earliest battles, his brothers, his vows, the moment he first touched the raw, terrifying purity of the warp in training. And something else, something he did not recognize. A shadowed figure in gleaming silver armor. Not gray knight silver, something older, colder, etched with runes he instinctively knew were forbidden to exist. The figure's helm was a blank, expressionless mask. No sigils, no chapter, no identity. Yet it stood where no memory should have been. The figure raised a hand, the chains convulsed violently. Light flashed, blinding. A sound like a soul being torn apart filled the chamber. Then silence, deep and sudden, swallowed everything. When Kalen opened his eyes again, he was lying on the cold vault floor. The chains were gone, the sphere of memory was gone. The failsafes were silent. The vault, once a living instrument of the Inquisition's will, now felt like the corpse of a machine. He pushed himself up, muscles shaking, mind reeling. The shadowed figure's presence lingered like smoke in his skull. This was no hallucination, no implanted echo. It was a memory that didn't belong to him, or to any living gray knight. The air shifted. A whisper, faint as a dying ember, brushed against the edges of his hearing. Unmade or remade. The choice approaches. He wasn't alone. His mind raced, trying to piece together meaning. That figure, that impossible armored presence, had intervened, not to help him escape the chains, not to protect him, but to ensure he survived the truth. A clang echoed from somewhere beyond the vault door, heavy, metallic, followed by the unmistakable scrape of armored boots. Not one pair, several. The silence of the vault broke into shards. The Inquisition had felt the failsafe discharge. They were coming to finish what the memory rewrite had failed to achieve. Kalen's instincts surged to the surface, pure and sharpened by decades of battle. He pressed his hand to his temple, steadying the storm inside his mind, forcing himself back into clarity. Armor systems flickered, runes reactivated. Psychic wards reknit themselves like sinew reattaching to bone. But he knew he was weakened. And they knew it too. The vault door trembled again. He could hear voices now, muffled, distorted, but unmistakably resolute. Open it. Terminate the subject. He cannot be allowed to leave this chamber. Kalen drew himself to his full height, every movement heavy and deliberate. He reached for his nemesis blade, fingers brushing the hilt, and realized something strange. His hand was trembling not from fear, but from memory. That armored apparition, those runes, that voice. A whisper of doubt curled at the edges of his soul. What if this truth was far larger than his punishment? What if the Inquisition was not purging him to silence a mistake, but to conceal a legacy capable of shaking the Imperium itself? The vault door's final lock disengaged with a boom that echoed like a gunshot. Light carved across the chamber. Kalen stood ready. Yet deep inside him, beneath the rage and resolve, a new question burned brighter than any fear. Who, or what had reached into his mind at the moment of his unmaking? And why did it feel as though that entity had been waiting for him to see the truth buried beneath the lie? The boots outside shifted. Weapons were raised. The door began to open. And Kalen realized that whatever stepped through would not just be an execution squad, but the next piece of the impossible puzzle he had only begun to uncover. The vault door opened like an eyelid forced awake, spilling white light across the chamber's fractured stillness. For a heartbeat, Kalen saw only silhouettes, armored, rigid, purposeful. Their weapons weren't raised in aggression, but held in a posture of grim duty, as if they themselves were uncertain whether they were entering a battlefield or a tomb. The air swelled with a quiet tension, the kind that precedes understanding rather than conflict. Then the figures stepped inside, and Kalen recognized them, not executioners, not inquisitorial enforcers, but his own brothers. Their silvered armor caught the light like shards of a distant sunrise. Their helms remained sealed, yet the weight of their presence felt unmistakably familiar. These were the knights he had fought beside, laughed with in the brief spaces between war, carried through fire, and mourned when they fell. He did not lift his weapon. Neither did they. For a moment, no one moved. The vault hummed softly, the remnants of its psychic mechanisms fading into a sigh, as if exhausted by the truth it had failed to contain. Kalen felt the last tremors of the chains lingering in his bones, not painful now, but strangely hollow, like echoes of a storm long past. The lead knight stepped forward. His voice, when it emerged, carried no accusation. "Kalen, you're alive." It was said without relief or suspicion, simply an acknowledgement, a truth spoken aloud to anchor the moment. "I am," Kalen answered, his voice steady despite the turmoil still swirling beneath the surface. "And I know what was done." A silence stretched between them, not hostile, but uncertain. These were men bound to duty, shaped by purpose. Yet even they seemed to feel the shifting ground beneath their feet. Another knight, one who had once trained beside Kalen in the psychic halls of Titan, moved forward. His helm tilted slightly, as if trying to see through the cracks forming in an old doctrine. "We were told you triggered forbidden systems," he said. "We came to contain the incident. Nothing more. Contain. Not destroy, not cleanse, not erase." The Inquisition had expected a broken mind, a shattered soldier, a danger to himself and others. Instead, they had found a knight standing on ground he had not chosen yet refused to abandon. Kalen breathed slowly, grounding himself in the present. "What I saw, it changes everything." The lead knight's posture shifted imperceptibly. Not aggression, not fear. Something gentler, maybe curiosity, maybe concern. "Then speak," he said. "Not as a suspect. As a brother." Kalen felt a faint stir of warmth at that word. Brother. Not a title, but a bond, fragile perhaps, yet resilient enough to withstand doubt. He told them what he could, the altered memory, the erased truth, the presence in his mind that had appeared when the chains tried to rewrite him. He described the armored figure of impossible origin, the runes that should not have existed, the voice that had spoken across a gulf of unknown time. None of them interrupted. They listened as knights do, fully, quietly, without letting judgment cloud the clarity of observation. When Kalen finished, the vault felt even quieter than before. Not empty, expectant. Finally, the second knight spoke, his voice low and contemplative. "If what you say is true, then someone has tampered with the very foundation of our oaths." Kalen looked at him, searching for doubt. Instead, he saw something far more dangerous. Acceptance that the universe might be larger, more complicated, more flawed than any doctrine had allowed them to believe. The lead knight turned toward the dimmed apparatus at the vault center, the space where the memory sphere had once hovered. "Then this chamber is no longer a place of truth," he said quietly. "It is a place of endings." He looked back to Kalen. "And perhaps new beginnings." A subtle warmth bloomed in Kalen's chest. Not triumph. There was no triumph to be found here, but a sense of emergence, as if he had climbed out of a collapsing star and discovered that something still lived inside the ashes. One of the knights asked, "What will you do now?" Kalen glanced at the ruin around him, at the fractured systems, at the shadows where lies had been dressed in the colors of truth. And beyond that, he thought of the figure in his mind, the one who had appeared not to command him, not to shape him, but simply to witness. "I will seek answers," he said, "not in defiance, not in rebellion, but because I cannot fight for a truth I do not understand." The lead knight nodded once, not in approval, but a recognition of a path that had already begun before any of them realized it. "Then we will not stand against you," he said. "Nor will we stand blindly for what we cannot verify. We will report that the vault malfunctioned and no corruption or dissent was detected. You will have time. Not much, perhaps. But some." Kalen felt the weight of those words. A gift. A risk. A line drawn quietly where no one else could see it. He bowed his head slightly, gratitude wordless but understood. The knights began to retreat, steps echoing softly, their presence fading from the vault like morning fog dispersing under the first light. As the door closed, Kalen found himself alone again, but not the same kind of alone he had been moments before. He exhaled, long and steady, a breath that felt like stepping into a future unbound by someone else's narrative. He walked to the space where the memory sphere had vanished. Nothing remained but faint cracks etched into the metal, faintly glowing like embers sleeping beneath ash. He touched one gently, warm, alive somehow. A soft pulse coursed through his fingertips, not hostile, not controlling, just present. He wondered if the shadowed figure had left it behind intentionally, a sign, a reminder, or simply a trace of its interference. He tried to sense meaning in the warmth, but it offered only silence, a kind of serene emptiness. He closed his eyes. Perhaps the universe didn't always grant clarity. Perhaps some truths were found not in answers, but in the courage to acknowledge uncertainty. If purity was measured only by obedience, then no mind could ever be clean. But if purity was measured by intention, by compassion, by the will to protect even when doctrine demanded destruction, then he had never fallen. He was not unmade. He was simply unfinished. The vault felt strangely vast now, as if its walls had stepped back to make space for whatever he would become. He turned toward the corridor beyond, where dim lights flickered invitingly, guiding him into a wider world he had always defended but seldom questioned. He paused at the threshold, letting the silence settle around him one last time. What is truth, he wondered, if it can be edited? And what is loyalty if it demands blindness? Questions with no immediate answers, but questions that mattered. Questions worth walking into the unknown to explore. He took his first step out of the vault. The door slid shut behind him with a gentle hiss, sealing away the echoes of lies and the whispers of revelations. But inside his mind, a new clarity had begun to bloom, subtle, fragile, but unmistakably alive. Some stories, he realized, do not end with victory or loss, but with awakening. And some awakenings change everything they touch. As he walked down the corridor, leaving behind a place that had nearly erased him, he allowed himself a single quiet reflection. The universe is vast. The soul is vaster still. And perhaps the greatest duty any warrior can uphold is not obedience, but understanding. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if you want more journeys into the hidden corners of this universe, don't forget to like, comment, and share. Your voice helps keep these stories alive.